Hi guys, and welcome back to episode number 2 of my new series, Eat Smart. Now today I'm going to help you understand a little bit more about carbohydrates. So this video was actually requested in the comments last week in my video about protein. So thank you, Richard. It's really good to be sharing all of my experiences with you guys as a bodybuilder and a personal trainer to help you understand a little bit more about nutrition. Towards the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you an update into how my own prep's going for my next bodybuilding show. So stay tuned if you'd like to hear a little bit more. If you enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and set the bell to alert you every time I post a new video every Monday. I'm going to be helping you learn more about what different types of carbohydrates there are, what foods contain them, and how you can fit carbohydrates into your diet. Today's topic is one of controversy, so I'm looking forward to hopefully busting some common confusions around the topic of carbohydrates, or you might know them as carbs, and utilising my experiences as a competitor to help you learn more. I've been competing now for several years, and having started as an amateur and now competing as a pro, I've seen a lot of different diets, so it's ideal to be sharing my knowledge with you to help you understanding that little bit more. Now, throughout my time competing, I've been on several different diets. I've been on low carbohydrate diets. I've been on higher carbohydrate diets. Now, the carbohydrates for me tend to come lower when I'm dieting, and quite a lot higher when I'm in my off season where I'm looking to fuel my training and gain muscle. There's such a big stigma around carbohydrates, and it's often associated with trying to lose weight and potentially low carbohydrates facilitating that. And there's a lot of common diets out there that do go low carb. Ones like keto, which is lower carb and higher fat. And actually I had a comment on one of my previous videos from Lewis, who had tried keto, and he'd actually found himself on that diet because it was in the spotlight at the time, rather than understanding why he was on that diet and selecting a diet to suit his goals. So it's interesting to, understand why you're doing the diet you're on, and do you actually need to go low carb? Do you need to go low fat? Do you need to follow certain principles, or can you look at incorporating all of the macronutrients and either hitting a calorie target or those specific macronutrients separately into an overall target? One thing I must stress is that different diets work for different people. I know lots of people that get on quite well with low carbohydrates and higher fats. I myself, when I've tried really low carbohydrate diets, found that it didn't work for me. It left me feeling quite low in mood, low in energy, brain fog, things like that. So it does depend on you as a person and what your goals are. Whether you currently have carbohydrates as part of your diet or you're just looking to understand a little bit more, then everything I share with you is going to help that. This video is perfect for beginners starting out on their nutrition journey, also suitable for competitors, and can help personal trainers, people working in the industry, with some helpful tips, refreshers into the world of carbohydrates and nutrition as a whole. Now, one of the common questions that I often get asked is, will carbs make me put on weight? Now, the answer to this is simple. If you overconsume, then you will more than likely put on weight. And this could be through carbs, fat, protein, or a mixture of them all. If you eat in excess, then that is going to promote weight gain. It's very easy to latch on to the thought of going onto a low carb diet. But when I actually speak to people claiming to be on low carb, a lot of the time they're not realising what carbohydrate content is in different foods they're eating. So in actual fact, their carbohydrate isn't as low as they perhaps thought. A lot of confusion around that, but also in the media and through different channels, the promotion of demonizing certain foods labeling foods as bad foods or unhealthy causes people to not understand where to direct their nutrition. Ultimately, we all have choices each and every day of what foods we're going to eat, but it's trying to take on knowledge about what different foods do, how they make you feel, how they can lead you towards your goals. That's the most important part. Now, in my previous series about transforming your body, we covered a lot about goal setting and tips to stick to your diet, general adherence to your nutrition. So give those episodes a watch if you'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Having that clear goal in mind is key to any body transformation. Without it, you're going to get lost along the way and not really understand what you're trying to achieve. And by understanding your goals, you can avoid restricting unnecessarily. You can understand what is needed to get to your goals, and whether that's going to be diets or whether that's gaining phases, wherever your goal is leading you, you can take what I share with you into planning the right nutrition for you. So guys, let's get started with the basics. What are carbohydrates? Now, carbohydrates are primarily used as a fuel source, and they provide energy for our bodies and our brains. Now, we also use carbohydrates for things like mental alertness. Including them in your diet is going to help aid satiety and fullness. Another big plus is carbohydrates offering your diet fibre, and that's going to help with digestion and bowel function. So you can see here when the common misconception comes up as to you only need carbohydrates if you work out, that actually there's a massive amount of benefits to including carbohydrates in your diet. You can look to do this for a variety of different foods. And there's two different types of carbohydrates. So you've got simple carbohydrates, which offer a fast release of energy, and then you've got complex carbohydrates that offer a slower release of energy. As a calorie, we're looking at 4 calories per 1 gram of carbohydrates, which is the same as protein, and then fat is 9 calories per 1 gram. Now, when you're looking to include carbohydrates in your diet, like I've already said, we need firm goals in place. And it's a good idea to start to look at how you're going to monitor your calorie intake, which is something I spoke about in my previous series about how to hit a calorie target. So you've got a couple of different options there. Now, bearing that in mind, you can then start to sculpt how you want to include carbohydrates in your diet. So before we look a little bit more into the different types of carbohydrates and what foods contain them, hit me up with some comments as to what your go-to carbohydrate sources are. Now, my absolute favourite is oats. I swear I could probably eat oats for all 5 of my meals all day, every day. It would be interesting to hear from you guys what sort of carbs you like and why you like them. Some basic recommendations I'm going to give you are: eat every 3 to 5 hours, choose carbohydrates that digest well for you and leave you feeling good, and also look to include a variety of different foods when it comes to carbohydrate sources. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, we've got 2 different types of carbohydrates. So we've got simple carbs, which are often labelled as bad carbs. They're associated with the higher sugar levels. And then we've got complex carbs, which are the slower releasing carbohydrates. So things like your potatoes, your whole grain products. Understanding the different types of carbohydrates and how they can benefit you will ultimately help you include them in your diet and make informed decisions as to how you want to structure your day around that. I guess the main reason carbs can be demonized is their association with sugar. But it's the different types of sugar in the different foods we eat that can often lead to the label unhealthy or healthy. When you think about carbohydrates in foods, it often springs to mind straight away bread, cereal, things like cakes, pastries. Now, what I want you to start considering is there is carbohydrates in a lot of different foods that you might not have thought about. So take for instance things like Greek yogurt, which is 27% carbohydrates. Cottage cheese is around 30%. So there's a mixture of dairy products that do have a carbohydrate content. Then you can look at foods that are considered as carbohydrate sources. So if you consider things like lentils, they're 70% carbs but 30% protein and no fat. You've then got things like Brussels sprouts, which you're looking at around 70% carbohydrates but 25% protein. Then you've got your foods that are much higher in carbohydrates, like your potatoes and your rice. You've got fruit that's pretty much just carbohydrates, and jams, honey, sweets, things like that. So the big question is, how can you incorporate carbohydrates into your diet? Now, I'd urge you to look at the following: your training, what your goals are, and your preference. Now, let's look at the different carbohydrates that you can use when dieting or gaining. Now, what I'd like to do is share with you some of the swaps that I make and the different foods that I use in each different phase. Naturally, when I'm in a gaining phase, I'm going to be looking to consume a lot higher calories than when I'm in a diet. The idea is that when you're gaining, you're looking to be in a calorie surplus, which takes you over the amount of calories that you're expending. In a diet, ideally, you're going to be expending more calories than you're consuming, and that's going to contribute to losing weight and changing your body composition. Have a little look at this chart. Now, when I'm in a gaining phase, I'm looking at foods that are high in carbs, like rice, potatoes, and cereal. I'm then looking to swap these foods as I start to diet for your higher carbohydrate fruit and veg, so things like butternut squash, grapes, and I can look to incorporate things like oats instead of cereal. And then the further into the diet I get, I'm looking at things like rice cakes, which can replace things like oats. I'm looking at the lower carbohydrate fruits and vegetables. As a bodybuilder, one of the favourite swaps there is introducing rice cakes. Whenever you go to a bodybuilding show, it always makes me laugh. There is athletes everywhere munching on rice cakes. And I always joke to say that Callo, the rice cake company, should have shares in bodybuilding. The main reason is you can get a good source of carbohydrates, really easy to digest. And then you can add things like jam if you need more carbohydrates, peanut butter for your fats. And they're just a really easy food to have on show day. Another thing I do as I diet is transition through the fruits that I eat. So when I'm in my off season, I look at fruits like bananas, grapes, your higher carbohydrates. Then I transition into things like apples. And then as I go deeper into my diet, I'm looking at things like strawberries. So you can see here the different carbohydrate content. You've got your higher carbs, your middle of the road, and then your lower carbohydrates. Another thing that you can consider when bringing your carbs down is swapping out things like your energy drinks, your higher calorie fruit juices, things like that. You can swap for diet drinks, flavoured water, different options there. When I'm in a gaining phase and the carbohydrates are nice and high, if I was to eat all my carbohydrates through things like vegetables and fruit, one, I'd be extremely full. Two, I'd probably be quite uncomfortable. My fibre would go through the roof. And it'd be really hard to keep digesting that amount of food. So jam and fast released carbohydrates that are pretty much just carbs work really well. And then as I diet, I can take those items out. I'm not missing out too much because they don't particularly fill you up. And I can transition into my diet nice and easy. And this raises the topic of finding the right foods that are suiting your goals. If I was to use my carbohydrates on things like jam in a diet, then I'd probably be pretty hungry. Whereas if I can utilise things like veggies, fruit, I'm going to feel fuller for longer, much more satiated, and it's going to enable me to adhere to the diet for longer periods of time. Now, I also mentioned looking at your training. Now, I myself train really early in the morning. So, what I like to do is have a nice big bowl of oats before bed, and the slower release carbohydrates there can help fuel my early AM session. I also take on some carbohydrates that I can digest nice and easily before I train. I then have faster release carbohydrates like rice after my training session, and that helps bring my energies back up and aids my recovery. The last thing I mentioned was preference. So, depending on what your goal is, you can look to utilize different foods within a calorie target that are going to help you achieve what you're looking to do. Now, if you want to use your calories on things like bread, then why not? If it digests well for you, you enjoy it, and that's what you want to use your calories on, then I would go ahead. It's all about working within what you're looking to achieve, and if you can hit a calorie target, the questions that come up as to should I eat this, shouldn't I eat this, start to disappear, because if you're within your calorie target, then you haven't got to worry about over consuming or not having enough. And the types of food you're choosing, depending on whether you're going to be flexible dieting or on a meal plan, can suit you. Now, I myself, I'm not particularly fussed by bread, so I generally don't include it in my diet. And that's just because, over the years I've decided that I'd rather use my calories on different foods. When you diet, it might be that you can't have as much of your things like bread to fit in with your calorie target. But if you can look at incorporating vegetables you like, or different foods, maybe cooking them in different ways, so things like tomatoes, nice and low in carbohydrates, you can fry those up with things like aubergines, courgettes, add your chicken, and you can make a really nice big meal that's going to fill you up on your diet, and that's going to help you stick to your diet for longer. Speaking of preference, I often see a lot of people choosing foods that they think they should have rather than the ones they prefer. So it's things like sweet potato or white potato. Now, a lot of people will go down the route of having sweet potato because they think it's healthier, but actually it's higher in carbohydrates. So it's about choosing the foods that you like that hit your calorie target rather than basing your choices on things that you think might be too unhealthy for you, but actually you don't know enough about. The same goes for things like salad. I'd much prefer to have veggies rather than a salad, but what I do is have less of the veggies to facilitate a similar calorie content. So make choices based on preference to help your diet. Ultimately, guys, you need to choose a diet that you're going to be able to stick to. So take everything into consideration and work out what the best diet for you is that you can follow and stick to. Now for an update into how my prep's going. Now, the fatigue that I'd been suffering with a few weeks ago that I mentioned in previous videos did return last week. Recovery became a lot harder, so I was able to train and put the intensity in, but the time around my training sessions, I was holding water, showing signs that my body was stressed. The scale weight was fluctuating quite a lot. My mood was affected a little bit, and my general energy was getting lower. So I spoke to my coach Stephen, and although it's tough to accept, sometimes you need to go into a bit more recovery. It's been decided that this week I will have a deload week. So that means I'm going to take out my compound lifts, so the bigger movements like deadlifts, squats, bench press, and I'm still going to train the same amount, but I'm going to look to ease back on the weight I'm lifting and take some of the intensity out to facilitate some recovery, so that next week I can go straight back into my training and hopefully bring that intensity back. Now, this is very common in a prep for a bodybuilding competition, and it's about being sensible, not leading into a complete burnout, picking up the signs and doing something about it. So I can still train, which is what I love, but I just need to dial it back a little bit. So I look forward to hopefully next week bringing those energies back and cracking on. It's been 9 weeks now of a 21-week prep. All being well, I will be on that stage in Portugal on the 7th of December. Next week, we're going to explore the world of fats. So I look forward to sharing the information I have with you to help you learn a little bit more. If you've got any feedback, hit me up in the comments, like this video and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you next week.